Hi everyone, it's Arundhati and welcome to another episode of the Let's Talk Yoga podcast. Today we're diving deep into two concepts that have become synonymous with yoga and the wellness culture, and that is meditation and mindfulness. I got the idea for this conversation when I was in southern Italy. I was there to attend a restorative yoga retreat, and one afternoon I was just lying in this lovely hammock staring into space. And that's when I was contemplating some things about meditation and mindfulness. And to be honest, we see these pretty much everywhere, right? From social media to phone apps, in yoga studios, in corporate boardrooms, and even in hospitals, it's being used as therapy. But I want to do a breakdown of what is meditation and what is mindfulness for the yoga teacher teaching a yoga class in a modern day yoga studio. Let's talk about the similarities, the differences, the history and origin, some cultural context. What do you teach first? Is it mindfulness? Is it meditation? Does one lean on the other? Who should practice meditation? Who should practice mindfulness? And to be honest, often we misrepresent meditation. We wrongly label some mindfulness practices as meditation. So I wanted to have this clear cut conversation on the podcast. And we'll even look at how to measure your own success when you are meditating or being mindful. And I'll share some examples that you can share with your students in classes as well. Okay. So before we get to it, please remember to rate and subscribe to this podcast. And if you have an extra 10 seconds in your day, please leave us a review. You can also use the review tab to leave me topic suggestions and questions. I was listening to another and it had nothing to do with yoga. And that's where I saw that they were using the review part in Apple Podcasts as a way to source questions from their community. And I think it's a wonderful idea. So if you have topic suggestions and questions that you would love for me to address on the show, then make sure to leave them there, or you know where to find me on Instagram. Let's get to today's show. Hi everyone, I'm Arundhati and you've just tuned in to the Let's Talk Yoga podcast, your ultimate online destination for learning about yoga. Whether you're a seasoned yoga teacher or a curious yoga student, there's something for you here. Let this podcast be your virtual yoga school. We offer insights, inspiration, and loads of nerdy exploration of yoga along the way. But first, who am I? I'm an Indian immigrant yoga teacher living in America for the past decade. I have my own yoga school here in Seattle, and I'm also a Bollywood choreographer, and I've nurtured a thriving yoga community at my studio, as well as a global yoga audience through my courses and this podcast. Through this podcast, I intend to create a space for you, the yoga student and yoga teacher, to learn about yoga in depth. Think of this as your online yoga school, free teacher training coming to you every week. So grab your cup of chai and let's jump in. They say meditation is as old as humanity itself. Now, there is no doubt that meditation is ancient, it is deep, and it is rich. The original Sanskrit term for meditation is called dhyana. Okay? That's Dhyana, dhyana. And it comes from the Sanskrit root word dhi, which means to think or reflect. And it gives rise to the word dhyana, which means to contemplate or to meditate, or contemplation or meditation. We can find references to meditation way back in the Vedic era if you are familiar with yoga history. If not, there are a couple of episodes where we've done the history of yoga, the history of asana on the podcast. I'll link those for you in the podcast description if you are curious. But we can find some references to dhyana in the Vedas, especially in the Aranyaka and the Brahmana parts of the Vedas, though they were not necessarily very clearly defined, at least back then. It would allude to some form of contemplative reflection. It's only in the Upanishads where dhyana gains a little more specificity. For example, in the Kaushitaki Upanishad or the Chandogya Upanishad and even the Dhyana Bindu Upanishad, we talk a lot more about meditation and meditative instruction. So think of it this way: it started with some form of inner reflection, inner contemplation. We started to look inward during the Vedic phase, and then that started to get more structure and became more concrete as we moved through time. So, meditation as dhyana has very deep roots. And you will even find dhyana mentioned in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, and it is the seventh limb of yoga right before samadhi. Meditation actually stretches well before the classical systems of yoga, and it is extremely rich and ancient. I would like to quickly mention that Buddhism also has dhyana and meditation. It is a big part of their practice. In fact, the Western world was largely introduced to meditation through the rise of Buddhism, but in yoga, it has existed since time immemorial. Okay? It is believed by the time Buddhism hit mainstream, meditation was already a mature practice. I hope to do a conversation about Buddhism and yoga someday on the podcast and have a teacher give us more information and depth about Buddhism. But I wanted to quickly plug in that dhyana exists in Buddhism as well as yoga, and it dates way back in yoga. Before we get deeper into this conversation about mindfulness and meditation, let's pause and clarify what exactly is mindfulness and what exactly is meditation. I want you to feel free to pause the podcast here if needed. What is mindfulness? If you and I were in a class together and we had this conversation, what is mindfulness? What would you come up with? How would you explain to a student or even to yourself what is mindfulness? Now, mindfulness is the very act of paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. It's portable. You can be mindful while doing anything, whether you are washing dishes, listening to a student, walking your dog, or even listening to this podcast. Mindfulness is portable. It goes everywhere where you go. So you could be fully present on purpose without judgment from the moment you wake up to the moment you close your eyes. So mindfulness travels with you every single moment of your life. The reasons why some of us are not mindful is because we are constantly distracted and we are multitasking and our senses are overloaded. We've gotten so used to looking at our phones or doing 5 things at once and trying to squeeze out as much as we can out of a minute that our mind is more full. Full. It is so full that we are unable to be deeply present in a moment. So mindfulness is a quality of awareness. It is paying attention, deep present attention on purpose. And this is very important, doing it without judgment. Okay? Mindfulness also means not escaping a moment, especially if that moment is something you don't like, it's unpleasant. We tend to grab our phones, we tend to numb ourselves, we tend to escape. So mindfulness is not avoiding that which is unpleasant as well. Now, if we draw a parallel, meditation, dhyana, is a more structured, often seated practice. It usually involves choosing an object, and this object of focus could be your breath, could be a mantra, could be a visualization or imagery. It could even be an intention, and training attention towards steadiness and absorption. Meditation is like the gym where mindfulness muscles are strengthened. Okay? Some teachers will tell you that meditation is not an act. Concentration, dharana, the sixth limb of yoga, is an act. It is very intentional. And then meditation is actually a state that you embody. Okay? But know that meditation is mostly seated, often with your eyes closed, and it has very clear structure. There are 2 types of meditation, broadly speaking: guided meditation and unguided meditation. Guided meditation is where you have a teacher, a video, or an app, guiding you. There are instructions, and you are being told a set of things to do. Sit straight, sit on a little bit of height, close your eyes, draw your mind to your breath, so on and so forth. So somebody is detailing what to do and creating that container for you to experience what it feels like to sit down and to begin the practice of meditation. The other category, broadly speaking, is unguided meditation. In this form, you sit with your eyes closed and there is no external guide. You guide yourself through meditation. It often resembles the silent seat we do sometimes in yoga classes, and there is no external instruction, and the practitioner goes through meditation on their own. Now, if you ask me personally, I believe that both are equally applicable. It depends on who the student is. And some days you might lean towards guided meditations more. And on other days, you might lean towards unguided meditation. Broadly speaking, if I was teaching meditation in teacher training, I would often say that beginners who are not sure what to do and how to do it, they do better with guided meditation where someone is telling them exactly what to do. And once you are more settled into that and it's consistent for you and your yoga starts to deepen, then practitioners will move more towards unguided meditation. Does that make sense? I hope it does because it is such a significant distinction. And you might be wondering, what about the other types of meditation? Walking meditation, journaling meditation, loving kindness meditation. I'll get to these in a moment. But to understand the relationship between mindfulness and meditation, know that practicing mindfulness throughout your day makes meditation easier. In many ways, I would say that your undergrad is mindfulness and then your graduation is meditation. Okay? So practicing mindful moments throughout your day will strengthen your ability, will enhance your ability to meditate more effortlessly. Your mind is already trained to return to the present moment when you practice mindfulness in different ways. What usually happens is people are having a very rushed, busy day. Their mind is full. They sit down and they close their eyes and they try to meditate, and that often backfires. So remember to practice more mindful moments throughout the day, and this will eventually set you up for more success in meditation. At the same time, deeper meditation cultivates qualities like concentration, equanimity, and compassion, and those start to spill over from your meditation into your everyday life and relationships, naturally making you more mindful and more present. I want you to think of mindfulness as the soil and meditation as the roots. They both nourish each other. And if we look at cultural context of mindfulness and meditation, they didn't arise in a vacuum. In fact, both are deeply rooted in Indian and Buddhist worldviews, and they see life as impermanent and suffering or dukkha as imminent, and liberation, moksha, as the highest goal. What has happened in the West is we've reframed mindfulness and meditation as tools for stress relief, focus, productivity, concentration, instant calm, and mental health. Now, that's not inherently wrong. You do get those benefits from being mindful and starting a meditation practice. But when we sever these from their roots, we risk losing the depth of these practices. So know that there's a lot that exists in the world today. Everybody's trying to sell you something because the wellness industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry. It is very challenging to reach instant zen in a minute or instant calm in 3 minutes. You will see a lot of these apps trying to take you to these different end goals, these destinations in a few minutes. And that's not necessarily how mindfulness or meditation works. Okay. As yoga teachers, we often carry the responsibility of bridging these two worlds between mindfulness and meditation and making practice accessible without erasing its heritage. So let's talk about why do we often fail at meditation? And I'm speaking for myself. There have been many years where I have dabbled in and out of meditation. And I've realized that as my yoga goes deeper, it becomes easier to sit in silence. But there are many, many countless days where I have felt like meditation is not for me. So let's talk about some of these common traps that we find when we start to meditate. And you probably can add your own to this list. But some of the things I've noticed is often we just try too hard. We are striving for too much and we are not surrendering enough. When we sit down and close our eyes and we are determined to conquer the mind, we often find ourselves forcing our way through meditation. We push through it. And what happens? The mind will rebel. Instead of quiet, we see the chaos. And meditation isn't about muscling your way into silence. That will not work. Meditation is a delicate balance of effort and letting go. And this balance is hard to achieve. So remember that sometimes our own sincerity will push us to do more. In fact, we need to push less and surrender more. A second trap sometimes is we tend to suppress our mental energy. What do I mean by that? We often think that meditating means somehow the mind should be empty. It should exist in a vacuum where no thoughts exist. And that's not really possible. If you are alive, breathing, and functioning in this world, you will have thoughts. Thoughts are not the enemy of meditation. It is like taking a soda bottle, shaking it really hard, screwing on the cap even tighter. What will happen? Eventually, it will explode. Suppression, mental suppression, emotional suppression leads to more turbulence when you sit for meditation. So, I want you to remember that it's not about shutting your thoughts down. Okay. It is about not getting tangled with your thoughts. Your thoughts will exist. Your thoughts will be there. It is slowly learning to not constantly engage with the thoughts and to stay in contact with them. Think of it this way. When you sit for meditation, your thoughts are like clouds, and these clouds are just passing through. And you're not necessarily following every cloud, looking at every cloud, touching every cloud. Or if you are in traffic and you're driving, you only are driving. You're not noticing every single car that's around you and passing you. You know they exist, but you're not necessarily involved in those. So remember to not suppress your thoughts. They have to come to the surface. They have to boil over and spill out of us. The third trap is we do not lay a strong enough foundation. There is a lack of foundations. And learning how to sit and meditate will enhance certain virtues that are important for yoga. For example, virtues like your yamas, truthfulness, humility, compassion, ahimsa, all of these different yamas and even niyamas that we talk about in yoga, and we have several episodes detailing them if you are unfamiliar with them. These are like the soil in which meditation grows. And without them, our practice will often remain shallow. When you sit and anchor yourself in these yamas and niyamas, what happens is when you open your eyes and you step into the real world, you will start to embody these yamas, niyamas more effortlessly. So it is often said that anybody who is rooted in envy, jealousy, surrender, just chasing material things, they will often not be able to meditate. It is those who are a little more anchored in their yamas, niyamas, in qualities like humility, compassion, empathy, truthfulness, non-stealing, they will actually have more of an anchored experience in meditation. Another trap is that we misunderstand the very terrain of meditation. Many of us think that the wandering mind means we are failing. I used to think like that if I cannot hold my attention on my breath for 10 minutes without the mind wandering, I am failing at meditation. But actually, the wandering mind, the wandering attention, what we often call the monkey mind in yoga, is a beautiful stage. In fact, it is the first stage. It is the entry point of meditation. You have to know the landscape before you get deeper. So the wandering mind is not a mistake. It's thinking that the wandering mind isn't supposed to exist. So let the mind wander. Eventually, as you get deeper and deeper into meditation, you will notice that the wandering will slow down. There will be space between your thoughts, and you won't chase every thought that comes up. What you need is time and structure. And speaking of structure, the last thing I want to bring up as a pitfall for meditation is we skip structure, right? So often, we set unrealistic expectations and goals. Instead of doing a 3-minute meditation, we end up jumping into a 30-minute meditation. And it's like trying to lift 100 pounds on day one at the gym. It's not possible. So Many people give up. I get countless messages from people saying, my mind is so busy, I cannot meditate. My mind is too full, I cannot meditate. But those are precisely the reasons why we meditate. In fact, those who say they don't have time should be the first ones to meditate, because you end up creating internal time. In fact, if you are in my courses and at Aham Yoga, you would have often heard me say, we cannot slow down time, but we can slow down our breath. And that is as close to slowing down time as we'll get. So remember that progress in meditation is very gradual. We have to set realistic goals. It's cumulative and it's extremely systematic. It's because we bounce around from one meditation to the next and we don't have that foundation that we feel like meditation is a much more challenging journey and often not for us. So if you are a yoga teacher or a yoga nerd listening to this, here are some practical guidance tips that you could use for yourself and maybe even in your classes. For your students, normalize the wandering mind. Tell your students that if the mind wanders 100 times and you manage to bring it back 100 times, that's 100 repetitions of being mindful. The more mindful you are of your wandering mind, the easier it will be to meditate. Always remind your students and yourself to start small. A few minutes of seated silence after class can be more powerful than trying to sit for too long too early. And something we all should be doing more of is we should embed more mindfulness into the micro moments of life, into the micro moments of classes, from adjusting the straps to laying down in Shavasana to bringing your props to rolling your mat, the way you walk in and out of the studio. All of these are micro moments where you can practice being intentionally present and remind them that meditation happens on the cushion, but mindfulness happens in life. I would highly encourage you and your students to journal, especially your meditation. I've seen this being offered in many different meditation schools, and I would not take it very seriously. I would always dismiss the journaling aspect of meditation, but after dismissing it many times and finally trying it, it is such a wonderful outlet, such a wonderful release, and it helps prevent suppression and actually allows for refinement of thought and clarity. So remember to keep a journal. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to journal after every single meditation, but it is something you could add into practice casually or deeply, depending on how it lands with you. And lastly, as a practical guide for teachers, remember to anchor in your yamas and niyamas. Without these, meditation has no soil to take root. Now, I want to share some examples of being mindful and some examples of a simple meditation practice. Now, mindfulness practices are anything you do in a given day. It could be something as simple as brushing your teeth. It could be making your morning cup of chai. It could be walking your dog. It could be driving to work. It could be anything. Okay, any task that you do on repeat, if you can learn to be fully present, fully absorbed without distracting yourself, then you are practicing mindfulness. If you are starting off, I would highly recommend that you suggest one or two activities to your students or even for yourself that they do every day where they are fully present. For example, if you are stacking or unstacking a dishwasher, or if you are taking your morning shower, to do it without distractions, to do it without music playing, without a podcast playing in the background, even if it's Let's Talk Yoga, and to slowly just be fully present. Notice the sounds, notice the sensation of the activity you are in, notice the temperature, notice if your mind is just drifting off, and to always return to the present task. Think of it as monotasking, solo tasking instead of multitasking. The more you can practice mindfulness in these micro moments, the stronger and easier it will be to meditate. What we sometimes offer as meditation in the yoga world is actually mindful practices. For example, walking meditation is actually a mindfulness exercise. Journaling is also a mindfulness exercise. It is used as an outlet after meditation, but it's actually a mindful activity. So know that sometimes we as yoga teachers, we confuse the terrain and we call mindfulness activities as meditation. But meditation is actually, if you do it in the way it's supposed to be, it is a seated, closed eyes practice. You could also ask your students in asana classes to be fully present, to feel the sensations of the poses, to listen to the instructions, to feel the sounds in Shavasana, the contact points between them and the floor, without labeling, reacting, and just being in observation mode. Okay. And when you teach, practice being fully present with your students and listening with full attention and not necessarily drifting off in your head. So there are infinite ways to be mindful in life. And I would highly recommend that you pick one or two things for yourself or encourage your students to pick that and to start to practice being fully present in that. And the more you start to do it, your mindfulness capacity, ability starts to strengthen. Meditation, on the other hand, is where you actually sit on a cushion. You sit comfortably, you close your eyes, and the easiest way to start is to focus on the breath. And every time the mind wanders away from the breath, you bring the mind back to the breath. I would start with 3 minutes and eventually make that 5 minutes. I would highly recommend that you don't jump to 10, 15 minutes if you're not already anchored in it. If you already have mantra meditations like Soham or something like that established, you could stay with mantra meditation. Or if you have some visualization like Om symbol or the flame of a candle at your heart center, that could also be a practice. Okay. But if you are unsure, unfamiliar, the breath is the most straightforward thing to anchor your attention. So remember that mindfulness practices happen when you are moving through life. Meditation practice happens when you are seated on your mat, closed eyes, and moving into that internal state. I look at our asana classes as mindfulness activities where you're fully present during asana. And then after Shavasana, when you sit in silence, that becomes your meditation. So I would encourage you to start small and to be consistent and even expect distraction. Make that normal. It's not failure. It's your training ground. So remember that mindfulness and meditation support each other. Mindfulness makes meditation smoother. You are less reactive. You respond better. You are more attentive. You are quicker to notice distractions. And meditation deepens mindfulness by strengthening focus and equanimity. And you end up carrying that sense of calm and groundedness into everyday life. In early stages, mindfulness supports meditation. In later stages, meditation enriches mindfulness. It's a continuous cycle of mutual reinforcement. And lastly, you can measure your success in these practices. Okay. And it's how you measure them is actually by asking yourself a few questions. And that is not about how empty your mind is. In fact, you ask yourself how you are moving about in everyday life. Are you more aware of your thoughts and emotions? Do you return to the present moment more quickly when distracted? Are you less reactive, more compassionate, more patient? And are you more consistent in showing up even on the hard and busy days? These are the true markers of growth in mindfulness and meditation. And it's not about getting to an empty mind. So that's what I would like to leave you here with. I hope you start a mindfulness and meditation practice. Choose one activity daily and do it mindfully, and sit for 5 minutes a day with your eyes closed. You can choose guided or unguided meditation. And maybe journal once a week. And that would be a good way to start this journey. And at the end of the month, you can circle back and see where you are. And hopefully this will add up as time goes on. I hope you found this short episode useful and impactful. If you are local to Aham Yoga, my studio, I'm doing a How Not to Fail in Meditation workshop soon in October. It's at the end of October. And that's largely an in-studio workshop. So you will have to be present at Aham Yoga. I'm hoping that this podcast will help all our non-local listeners and students. As always, I wish you the best in your yoga journey and life. And please remember to sign up for my monthly Yoga Teachers Enrichment newsletter. The next one is going out on October 2nd, and it contains resources, podcasts, blogs, and a whole lot of other things, including details about our online 300-hour that's starting in January. Enjoy your practice. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.